Okay, so today we're going to talk about 4 warning signs that your marriage is headed in the wrong direction. Right? Wouldn't it be nice to know if they're red flags? Like in business, if you have a company, you know on your P&L, there's certain things. Of course, the bottom line, if it's negative, you're going in the wrong direction. But hopefully you have KPIs and just indicators that show you you're going in the wrong direction. So I want to talk about your relationships, your marriage, right? If you're committed, like in a Christian marriage, and you want it to be built up, these are 4 warning signs that you might be headed in the wrong direction. Like, don't go this way, don't enter, like turn around right away. And so the first, most obvious warning sign to me is that you won't give in and you won't lean in until they do. So that's number 1. So if you in your marriage won't give in, won't lean in, won't say, will you forgive me, or won't take your part until they do, that might be a warning sign that you're headed in the wrong direction. Because what comes underneath that without wanting to give in is this pride and this desire to be right. And I speak from experience that when I desire to be right, I will wreak havoc in Skylar. I will tear him down at all costs. I will say things that I definitely regret saying, and I will not show up as my best self. I was working through a struggle with Skylar. So when you get in conflict with your spouse, do you have a coach? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a third party? So not your girlfriends that you go to coffee with and go to lunch with, but do you have a third party that's willing to bring you back to center and cause you to be the best woman or the best man that you're called to be? Do you have someone that can bring out the best in you so that you're willing to come back in? So I have a couple people like that in my life that I go to, that I get coached with regularly, because I want to be my best version and I need outside eyes on this. And I had come into the conversation and I was really frustrated at Skylar and I didn't want to be anymore. And I asked and we prayed and I tried to get underneath what my triggers were, and we brought it to the Lord, right? I had to give it to him because I couldn't figure it out on my own. And we had asked the Lord, what's your vision for our marriage? And I believe the Lord gave me fireworks. And he gave me this just vision of seeing Skylar and I just connected and passionate and in love. But the one thing standing in front of me creating fireworks in our relationship was me being willing to lean in, me being willing to ask for forgiveness, me being willing to step in even when I didn't feel like it. So maybe there's something that's happened recently in your relationship and you're waiting for him or her to be the one to rectify it. We always say in our house, the most emotionally mature person moves first. But I'm going to challenge you that's watching this, you be that person. Can you move first? Can you put down your pride and your ego and your desire to be right? And can you create resolution before they do? I challenge you, right? That's who the winner is today, the one that goes first. Right, so a warning sign that you're just going the opposite direction is if you're leaning in and you're trying to let these conflicts that are inevitable in marriage draw you closer together versus tear you apart. When we go through conflict, we can let that draw us further apart, or we can come to a resolution and bring it closer together, and that's what I desire for you. And so warning sign number 2 that kind of leads in that same direction. So you might be going down the wrong direction if you're defining your spouse by the past. I often say to Skylar, if he's oh, well, you'll probably do this. And I'm like, don't even say it. Don't tell me what I'm going to do. Yes, I may have done that in the past, but that is not who I am. I need you to speak life over me, not death over me. I don't want to be that person. I need you to speak words of affirmation over me. Who is it possible for me to be? Who am I living into? I have a tendency to go to anger and to take things personal when we're in arguments. And I don't want to define myself by that. I'm trying to get out of that pattern, so I don't want him to speak those words over me either. But do you, if you've had a disruption in your relationship, if there's been infidelity, if there's been challenges with porn, or there's been trust broken, or there's been major rifts, the society would say forgive but don't forget. And I'm not asking you to forget, but could you be praying to the Lord to have just holy forgetfulness, that you don't define your spouse by that event, right? Can you see the best in them still and not define them by the one action or the 10 actions versus the thousands of actions that they've done since then? Because at one point, it would have been easy for me to define Skylar as not being trustworthy. And there's still, if I wanted to gather evidence of him not being trustworthy, there's still evidence of that. There are times when he breaks his word. He says he's going to do X, Y, and Z with the kids, and he doesn't do it. He says he's going to be home at this time, and he doesn't do it. But I have the choice. When I come from a place of responsibility, I have the choice. If you haven't seen the videos on the 4 R's, definitely go back to that. But I have the choice of how I define him. And I can speak life over him, or I can speak death over him. So the second warning sign that you might be going in the wrong direction is that you're bringing up the past. So the third warning sign that you might be going in the wrong direction in your marriage is that you give your best to everybody else. So when you go to work, you're happy, you put on a smile, you're connecting, you get coffee with your kids, you're involved, you're there, you're present, you're happy with your friends when you go get coffee, and then the moment your spouse comes in the door, the wall comes up, the face goes down, and your heart gets hardened. Is that you? Like, do you give your best to everybody else but him? Or maybe it's not him. Maybe it's someone else in your life. Do you give yourself to everybody else but them? And then the moment their presence comes in, like a switch, you flip it off. You're like, they're not getting me. They're not getting my light. They're not getting all of me. So I would challenge you, if you give yourself to everybody else, are you giving it to him or to her? And so part of that would be making them a priority, right? Is that relationship a priority in your life? And so when you think about priorities, it's not just time. It's time, attention, effort. That's how you know something's a priority in your life. So do they get the last of everything, right? Do they get the leftovers when you come home from work? Or do they get the leftovers after you're done with the kids? Or are they actually a priority in your life? And you make them a priority so that they're getting some of your best. So I don't know why what comes up is like morning sex, right? If you're married and you have kids and you both run businesses and you have a busy life, like maybe morning sex needs to come into the equation. And you need to find a way to connect. When there's a will, there's a way. So what are you committed to? Are you committed to giving them your best or giving them your worst? And that can look a lot of different ways. It can look like a date lunch. It can be like a planned date. It can have babysitters involved, but it takes intentionality. So if you've been lacking in intentionality in your marriage, I challenge you with this video. Share below what you're going to do. How are you going to be more intentional in your marriage? So the fourth warning sign that you're headed in the wrong direction is that you avoid hard conversations. So at our marriage retreats, we talk about conflict and why we avoid conflict. And some of the reasons we avoid conflict is because, man, it's hard, right? It's going to bring up the past, and it may create more disruption, right? It might feel uneasy, and it's just not fun going through it, and it feels like it's never going to end, right? Those are some of the things that people say to us why they avoid conflict. But what happens when you avoid conflict? Those exact same things. When it feels like it's never going to end, and that's why you avoid it, doesn't it never end because you don't address it? Or when you say that it's hard and that's why you avoid it, isn't it hard to not address it because you carry that with you every single day and you have to stay hard towards them? So all the reasons why you're avoiding that conflict are actually being presented to you by not avoiding it and by actually not addressing it. But what I know to be true about that is that when you avoid conflict, you create like a little scar tissue layer, if per se, like if this was your skin, and you create like a layer, right, of scarring on top of your marriage. And then when another conflict comes and you don't deal with it, you create another layer of scar tissue, right? And then all of a sudden you have this layer like this big in your marriage because you haven't dealt with things, right? And then the moment that little top gets bumped up against, it's like the pus explodes out of it. Is anybody like watching those YouTube videos where they squeeze that stuff, right? It's like that. It's just like explodes and it oozes. And it could have been a situation that could have easily been remedied if the first situation would have been handled with before you built it up. So you carry this baggage, and it creates a sensitivity around marriage, right? And it often creates hopelessness, right? If you carry this baggage and you're not clearing conflict, I would venture to guess there's a sense of hopelessness, that things are never going to change. And in hopelessness, that's where the enemy breeds death over marriages, because you feel like it's never going to change, because there's just so much evidence of it not changing because you're not addressing it. But you were the one that created that situation in the first place. So I challenge you, if there's been unspoken conflict or things that haven't been addressed, maybe you start with just one. If it's been a lot of stuff, I don't think you can address all of it at one time. But if you do want to step into this, I would say to you, the best advice would be that when you walk into this conversation, you walk in reminding your spouse what you're committed to. So if it were me, it'd be like, Skylar, I want to talk about a couple things, but I want you to know that I'm committed to having the best marriage with you. This conversation isn't easy for me, but I know it's what we have to do in order to get to our best, in order to get to a level 10 marriage. So would you be willing to walk through some hard conversations with me? Right? You could do that, or you could walk in and be like, hey, so I'm pissed about this and this and this and this, and I want to get through this, right? You would get a different response versus if you came in and started with your heart and kind of pre-frame the situation of this is what I'm committed to. And I know that we've got to get through this to get there. So are you willing to come with me? And some of them might not be willing, but can you stay committed even when they're not willing? Can you not punish them if they're not willing that moment? Maybe they need time to process that, right? Can you sit with them and be committed, even if it takes a week for them to be willing to process with you, or weeks or months? Can you give your best in the middle of that? So those were the 4 warning signs that your marriage might be headed in the wrong direction. And so that involves you leaning in, not defining your spouse by their past, giving your best to everybody else, making them a priority, and having those hard conversations. I'd love to hear what stuck out most for you. If you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe, hit the like button, and more great videos are coming.